May your goodness and protection be wonderfully evident in all which transpires in the ensuing hours. As we contemplate the work set before us, I pray for your peace and unity to prevail in all discussion and debate. May we choose our words carefully so as to communicate clearly a wise and prudent direction to follow. Your word declares in Psalm 139, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts, and see if there be any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." You know more about each of us, Father, than we even know about ourselves at times. You know about the things which keeps us from doing our best, as well as the things which make us a positive addition to all we encounter. I would ask that you grant each one the desire to find new depths within themselves as they pursue what is best for all whom they represent. I pray for all of our national and state leaders, and I'd ask that you give them the ability to reach a little higher, stretch a little further, and to work a little longer in helping our nation and state continue to be a beacon of hope and prosperity. I now pray for those experiencing sickness in body or spirit. I ask you to bring help and healing to them as only you can. And would you allow new vigor and strength to flow into their lives as they give themselves to the legislative work of the hour? I pray this in the name of the one who taught us to pray, and say amen and amen.
I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have all members had the opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and record the attendance. Messages from the Senate, the clerk will read.
Announcing adoption of SCR 1611, announcing passage of HB 2261, announcing passage of SB 269. The Senate concurs in House amendments to SB 4 and request return of the bill. SCR 1611, Senate concurrent resolution number 1611 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, a proposition to amend sections 5, 8, and 15 of Article 3 of the Constitution of the State of Kansas. SB 269 by Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning taxation.
Senate Bill 8 appears on the consent calendar for the second day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it'll remain on the consent calendar for the third day. Final action on bills and concurrent resolutions, the clerk will read.
SB 2313 by Committee on Financial Institutions and Pensions, an act concerning state-issued devices and networks relating to artificial intelligence platforms, prohibiting the use of artificial intelligence platforms of concern on such devices and networks.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2313. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The roll is still open. The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing 10 hands, call is in order. Doorman will secure the door. Clerk will read the roll.
Bourgeon, Carlin, Martinez, Meyer, Schreiber,
Representative Carlin votes no. Representative Sawyer Clayton votes no. Representative Schlingensieben votes no. Representative Schreiber votes aye. Not seeing 10 hands, call is raised. Does any other member wish to change their vote? Seeing none, with 95 having voted in favor and 27 against the passage of House Bill 2313, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The clerk will read.
HB 2382 by Committee on Appropriations, an act concerning the State Board of Education, increasing compensation of members of the board, establishing a daily rate of compensation.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2382. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative McNorton votes aye. Any further changes? Representative Susan Ruiz votes aye. Any further changes? Representative Penn votes no. Seeing no further changes, with 115 having voted in favor and 7 against the passage of House Bill 2382, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The clerk will read.
SB 9 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, an act concerning property relating to certain lands and military installations, enacting the Kansas Land and Military Installation Protection Act, prohibiting foreign principals from countries of concern from acquiring any interest in certain real property in this state, authorizing the Fusion Center Oversight Board to adopt rules and regulations to add or remove federally designated foreign terrorist organizations from the definition of country of concern, prohibiting foreign principals from countries of concern from receiving any economic development program benefits relating to drones and drone technology, prohibiting the acquisition of critical components of drone technology from countries of concern.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 9. Clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 104 having voted in favor and 18 against the passage of Senate Bill 9, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Majority Leader Croft for a motion to resolve into the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items under the heading of general orders.
You've all heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it and the motion carries. The Speaker appoints Representative Sutton to chair the Committee of the Whole.
All right, buddy, let's see. Feisty Friday, I see. All right, well, the first item of business is SB 7. For the purpose of carrying SB 7, the chair recognizes Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I forgot what I'm. Adam. The bill did not have any amendments.
Very good, proceed.
Sorry about that. So, Senate Bill 7, was brought by myself and Senator Titus. We worked over the summer with the local township, Soldier Township, where I live, which is basically North Topeka and part of northern Shawnee County. Soldier Township has over 15,000 residents, and it's much different than a lot of townships you think about that, might have one road grader or two, and they're out in rural parts of the state. We have over 125 miles of paved roads that our township maintains. We have a staff of 30 people that are full-time employees, along with the volunteer fire department. Over the years, we've talked about incorporating into a city or something where would help, if we were a city, we'd be able to have higher bond limits. That would set that bond limit at 30%, knowing if we were a city, we'd have other expenses like law enforcement and some other things that go along with that. So I think this bill that we came up with is a good compromise for what the townships are needing. So what this bill does is we took the one size fits all and categorized it into 3 tiers. So if there's 0 to 5,000 people in the township, it will stay at the current rate of 1%. If it's 5,000 to 10,000, we'll raise that bond limit to 5%. And if a township has over 10,000 people, it'll increase it to 10%. That'll be the limit for all the bonds they have outstanding. So one That'll be for regular township operations, construction of buildings, equipment, and that type stuff that a regular township does. Second part of this bill addresses those townships that have fire departments. That statute was established in 1949, and the bonding limit is set at 1.5%. This bill will make that bonding limit up to 5% of the assessed tangible valuation within the township. Right now, Soldier Township is wanting to build a new fire station, and at the current limit, it'd be roughly $2 million that they'd be able to put a bond out for. The estimates on the fire station are from the very minimum 4 million all the way up to 7 or 8 million, depending on how big and fancy we make it. So what that would do would give the township the authority to post a bond just to get more money for the fire department. Both of these will have to go up for election to the electorate before any bond will be passed. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll stand for questions.
Does any member desire to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The carrier of the bill did a good job describing what happens. It's a good bill that could save taxpayers money. I urge support.
Right, if there's no further discussion, Representative McNorton, you may close.
Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports Senate Bill 7 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative McNorton to report SB 7 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Next item of business is HCR 5011. For the purposes of carrying 5011, the chair recognizes Representative Croft. I got you.
Mr. Chair, pursuant to House Rule 1903, I move HCR 5011 appearing under the order of business general orders be passed over and retained a place on the calendar.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Very good. The ayes have it. It is skipped over. Next item of business is SB 21. For the purpose of, no, I'm sorry, I lied to you. It's HB 2396. So for the purposes of carrying HB 2396, the chair recognizes Representative Adam Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were committee amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Committee report is adopted. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Body, I'm going to do something a little different. For those of you who have had to stomach listening through my long tax explanations before, I want to give kind of a simple 30,000-foot view of what this bill is doing. And then if you're a tax and a numbers nerd like me, you can stick around for the detailed discussion, or if you want to go grab a cup of coffee, you can. But I want to explain that House Bill 2396 is going to be a joint partnership between the state and local governments to finally provide the property tax relief for the people of this state that they deserve. This is an intentional effort. In my former life, before I was a state legislator, I was a county commissioner, and even since 2008, when I first became a county commissioner, feels like there's always been this competition between state and local governments, the legislature and our cities and counties. We seem to be pointing the finger back and forth at each other, blaming each other for property taxes and the current situation we're in. The only way we ever fix this is to change their narrative. We need to begin working together with our local governments, the state legislature, and our cities and counties to provide property tax relief. And this is that bill. Cities and counties across the state perform multiple services for the state, like law enforcement, public health and safety, elections, motor vehicle registrations, and others. These services are mandated at the state level, and they are doing the state's business, but they're often either unfunded or completely or underfunded So in an effort to recognize our responsibility as a legislature to help fund our portion of elections and law enforcement and everything else, this new fund is being developed. It's called ASTRA. It is Acknowledging Stewardship of Tax Revenue and Appropriations. This fund will be a $60 million demand transfer fund that will be apportioned and distributed to the cities and counties across the state as an incentive to keep the property tax increases at a minimum. Now, I know what you're thinking. You probably had that first impression when you heard about this bill. The bill is fairly extensive and complicated. You might have had that impression even after you read the bill. We've had demand transfer programs before to local governments in the state. We just repealed them last year because they didn't work. Well, actually, they weren't funded, and they didn't really work because there was no accountability. The money just went straight out to these local governments, and we kind of crossed our fingers that they would lower their property taxes. This fund is completely different. Cities and counties must first adopt and certify their budgets and meet the minimum requirements before they can receive their payments. If this incentive fund is utilized to its full extent, it will result in approximately $70 to $75 million of additional property tax relief in addition to the $60 million at the local level. So you got $60 million from the state. It incentivizes local governments to keep their property taxes low. That will yield another $70 to $75 million above and beyond what we currently have under revenue neutral. That's $130 million of property tax relief per year. That's more than we've done in the last 3 years on property tax relief with the increase in the residential exemption from $20,000 up to $75,000. That was just a little over $100 million. With the 2% growth rate that is placed on the ASTRA fund over 5 years, that's a total, that could be a potential total of $675 million of property tax relief. 10 years, it's $1.5 billion. This works by providing low, reasonable growth for our local governments, inflation plus the growth factor, plus any voter-approved bonds or expenses. If voters have approved it already, they're stuck with it. They can't protest things that they've already approved. Hopefully, this methodology will incentivize smart, responsible financial planning at the local level. They will manage their budgets for the future much better. And this is one of my favorite parts. For those cities and counties that have consistently ignored the taxpayers across this state and consistently exceeded the well-intentioned but ineffective revenue neutral law, we have a special surprise for them. If they exceed the minimum thresholds to receive their ASTRA payment, not only do they lose their payment, but they are also now subject to a protest petition where the taxpayers can come in and put a stop to excessive increases without an expensive and time-consuming election. To make that as easy as possible, for the first time ever in Kansas law, we are requiring that the petition be held in a public office that is open and available to the public and allows for convenience and availability. The state or the Kansas County Treasurer's office is the office you will be able to go into. You can sign any petition that's available in your county, they will have it. Individual petitions are still allowed, so if you want to be a circulator and go out and get signatures, you can do that, but the county treasurer will have a copy of the petition. The county treasurer is also required to post on their website, social media pages if they have them. They have to post it in the office that these petitions are available to sign. And anytime between August 25th, when the budgets are certified, it's a 30-day petition, so sometime between August 25th and September 25th. If you can't chase down a petitioner to put your signature on, you can just go into the county treasurer's office and sign. We attempted to make this easy and simple, and it will be effective. So that's kind of my 30,000-foot view. Anybody that wants to go get a bathroom break, you can, but I will get into the details of the bill right quick, and then I'll be happy to stand for questions. A little bit more on the protest petition. This applies to all taxing jurisdictions except the state and the school. And the reason for that is many of the state levies are in statute. So if you protest the state levy, but it's law to levy that, you run into some legal complications. Also, a lot of your school levies are either already approved by the voters or contained in the statutes, the 20 mills for local school districts. There's a 30-day time frame from August 25th to September 25th to collect those signatures. The threshold for the protest petition is 10% of voters in the last presidential election race. The petition will be held in the county treasurer's office. The treasurers must post notice on their website and in their office. The threshold for qualifying for the ASTRA fund is last year's taxes, property taxes that were levied by the local government. So this doesn't take into account sales tax or any other revenue sources that they might have available to them. This is just focused on property taxes. It applies the CPI Midwest regional inflation rate. It applies a growth factor for new construction and development. This is something that the county clerks certified to the property valuation division at Department of Revenue, I think on July 1st. So that will be their actual growth. If you have a city that's growing, obviously they're going to require more in infrastructure and services with the population. So it just makes sense to allow that growth factor in there, in my mind. It also excludes any other voter-approved bond issues. The penalty for exceeding the threshold is nothing. Local governments still have the ability to adopt whatever budget they feel like they need. But the key piece is once you exceed that threshold, you are subject to protest petition should it be successful. The ASTRA fund is, the first year it is $60 million. It does have a 2% growth factor for each subsequent year. The apportionment of the fund to determine how much money goes out to each entity in counties is apportioned by 65% based on population and 35% on assessed valuation. The distribution is shared with all governments that qualify. So if your city qualifies, but your county doesn't, only the city gets it. If you have multiple cities, whoever is eligible to receive that payment will get it. The entire fund is not distributed based on who all is eligible. You will be notified by the state treasurer's office how much your piece of the pie is, so you can plan for that. Any unused funds are then transferred back into state general fund. The state treasurer's office will provide a report about the fund distribution, which counties and cities received it and which didn't. The final piece to the ASTRA fund is legislative accountability. Demand transfers that we've had in the past were not funded at a certain time. And we have a provision in here that tries to ensure some legislative accountability. If we do not appropriate this fund, the taxpayers lose their ability to petition. So it holds us accountable. We've got to put the money in this fund to allow our taxpayers to retain that protest petition ability. This does repeal the revenue neutral law. When I first sat down to start drafting this, I was trying to make an adjustment to the revenue neutral law. And after I got into it, it became very obvious that a lot of this stuff was redundant. We require a revenue neutral hearing. We already have a budget hearing. Oftentimes these things are back to back. They're talking about the same thing. It's kind of redundant. The revenue neutral law really wasn't effective. There are a lot of entities, and there might be some statistics on the number of taxing jurisdictions that followed revenue neutral law, but if you study the reports, they're on the Department of Administration's website. The vast majority of the ones that complied are your small districts. It's your cemeteries, your townships. We've got a rural fire district, your library districts. Most of those levy less than 1 mil, or right, I mean, it's very low. They historically didn't raise their levy much anyway. So you'll see a paper on your desk that I kind of prepared because there's a lot of concern about taking away the the power of the people with that revenue neutral rate, but the revenue neutral rate mostly focused on no increases. It's revenue neutral. You have to budget the same amount as you did last year. That's not really practical for a lot of your larger entities, your cities and counties that need, I mean, they've got insurance costs, they've got labor costs that consistently go up. It's unreasonable to expect year after year after year that they would be revenue neutral. So a lot of them always exceed revenue neutral because they need a little bit of growth. The problem with revenue neutral was once they voted to exceed revenue neutral, the sky was the limit. There was no further constraint, no inflationary growth. There was no limit on what they could go to. And there's been some local governments that have really abused that. The last piece I'll speak to regarding repealing the revenue neutral rate is it was somewhat hypocritical. As a state legislature, we told local governments, you can't exceed revenue neutral. The argument was, well, local governments just say that they held the mill levy flat, so they didn't raise taxes. But what happens as valuations increase? If valuations go up, but you hold that tax rate, that mill levy the same, that's an automatic tax increase. Your tax bill goes up. So we poked our finger at local governments, but guess what we do? We hold our mill levies flat. In state statute, we have 20 mills. We never adjust that for revenue neutral. We have 1.5 mills. We never adjust that for revenue neutral. I think we need to hold ourselves to the same standard as local governments, or as we expected the local governments if we're going to do that. If not, we don't hold them to that standard either. The fiscal note on this is very simple. It's $60 million, whatever we appropriate into the fund. I confirmed with Department of Revenue and State Treasurer's Office, there's no additional FTEs or programming costs. They can do all this relatively quickly and easily. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Right. Does any member desire to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the bill. The chairman of the tax committee did a very thorough job explaining the bill. Hopefully you all understand what it does, but bottom line is it provides at least $60 million of property tax relief from the state every year that grows by 2% a year. In addition to that, it provides an incentive for local governments to hold down their property taxes. So it'll provide local property tax relief as well. As he says, it creates a new partnership because if we don't fund our money, then the tax lid portion and the protest petition go away. So we both work together on this to reduce property taxes. The thing I've heard the most about from my constituents is they want property tax relief, and this bill provides a way for the state to provide some property tax relief in partnership to encourage locals to do the same.
To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Estes. There she is.
My apologies to the body. I was originally thinking about doing an amendment that dropped the 10% down. I think that but I decided not to because there's reasonable points to make to do it and not to do it. But I just want to kind of put on the record what my concern is. If you're in a small city or a smaller county, that raw number of what that 10% of the ballots cast is not very high. When you're in a larger community, that is an incredibly high raw number. For Sedgwick County, that number would be 21,662. And when you do a petition, experts will advise you to get an extra 1/3 because you will lose a certain amount of people who signed your petition who weren't really registered to vote. So you can see that by term, when you look at it in terms of a raw number, even though there is a scale to it, it is a lot. I have done a petition where it took me 3 months to get 3,000 signatures. And we spent a lot of money on radio ads to let people know where they could drive up and sign the petition. We had petition parties. It was a labor-intensive and not free thing to do. But when I reflected on it, I said, okay, this is a little bit different than a petition calling for an election because it does end the budget. So I'm not going to do an amendment, but I will be watching to see how that works out for us in the future and may come back with something after we've tried this. Thank you.
To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Truth and Taxation's biggest fan. I would almost say I'm a Truth and Taxation groupie. I mean, I love that law. And, you know, I appreciate the Senate Tax Chair for working so hard to get that into the books. And for the last several local election cycles, I have been in the trenches fighting to hold local government in my district and in Leavenworth County accountable by using that tool, that weapon that was given to regular citizens to hold their school boards, their city commissions, and their county commissions accountable. And when I first heard the idea of this bill, my immediate gut reaction is we can't do away with truth and taxation. We just can't. But I've done some soul searching on this, and I'm forced to admit that truth and taxation hasn't worked the way we intended it to. There's a handout on everybody's desk from the House Tax Chair that shows you the numbers. The property taxes have skyrocketed even worse since truth and taxation. Truth and taxation works if you can hold the local governments accountable, right? It's the stick approach that if you exceed revenue neutral, because we're no longer going to just blame it on the appraiser that the taxes went up, you have to affirmatively vote, school board member. You have to affirmatively vote, city commissioner or councilor. You have to affirmatively vote, county commissioner, that you want to raise my taxes. Otherwise, they're not going to exceed the revenue neutral rate. Well, that worked for the first year or two. I'll tell you what, it put the fear of God into those local elected officials, and they were they were holding the line. But then they discovered what I discovered, knocking 4,000 or 5,000 doors an election cycle to help municipal candidates get elected that would hold the line on revenue neutral. Folks don't come out for the odd year elections. And after a couple local entities in Leavenworth County didn't hold the revenue neutral and they didn't get voted out for it, a few more did it. And they didn't get held accountable, and now they're all doing it. They're all exceeding revenue neutral because they know that they're not going to be held accountable at the ballot box. And so, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I love truth and taxation. I love the principle of it. But until we can get more voter participation in the school board elections and the city commission elections, and the school board's where most of property taxes are going. The school district is where most property taxes go. Until we can hold them accountable, that it's not going to change. I love this alternative mechanism of doing the petition. The petition's about the turnout I wish we would get on the election. And I can, you know, it's a lot easier to say, hey, go to the county courthouse anytime in this time period and sign a petition than it is to get people off their butts in an odd year to go vote on school board and city elections. So I am forced to reluctantly admit that no matter how much I love truth and taxation, it didn't work out how we thought it was going to work out. And so I'm going to support this bill. I think this is a better way. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Petter Parshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I'm going to address as many portions of this as possible. First of all, with revenue neutral, I think one of the big issues is that we don't have partisan elections and they're odd numbered years. But using my county as an example, we have flipped our entire county commission. My local school board has flipped their entire school board, and the school board last year didn't just stay revenue neutral, we went below revenue neutral. And I realize that that's not the case all around, but we went out and we made sure to campaign hard and we got the job done and made sure that the voters' voices were heard and the taxpayers' voices were heard. With that, I have a question for the carrier of the bill.
Morning.
Good morning. I had a question when it comes to the 60 million in the Astra Fund. It's divided by 35 and 65. Is all of that required for them to stay under the, CPI of the budget increase, I guess? Or is it a portion?
Yes, the way that works is when the state treasurer's office, they'll take that $60 million worth of money in that fund, and they will decide for each county in Kansas, they will apportion out how much that county would receive. And when I talk about county, I'm talking about the county government. I'm talking about the county as a whole, the county and all the cities within that county. So they will apportion that $60 million, or whatever that number is, by 65% based on population and 35% based on the valuation. That will give them that proportion. So within that county, then they will take that amount, and depending on which cities and if the county qualifies for it, they will distribute that. They're eligible for the payment based on the proportion of taxes that they levy. So if you have a county that levies $2 million, the city levies $2 million, they each get 50% of the fund. If you had another county or another city that was another $2 million, it would be a third of that total aggregate county money that they would get. That apportionment doesn't depend. They still have to, they don't automatically get any of it. I don't know if that's the question you're asking. They have to maintain that minimum threshold or below to get any money.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. After reading that section, I actually checked with the advisors, and that didn't appear to be the answer. It appeared to be the answer that only 35% of the 60 million was held accountable to the.
I can go check with
Yeah,
the
if you don't
revisor.
mind.
Yeah. Let me double check. I've got my revisor right over here. The revisor did explain that the way it is written, it will be distributed based only on it if they qualify.
Okay, so it's the full 60 million. It's not just the 21 million.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so even if we go to using the full 60 million and having to qualify, that equates to, for example, in Johnson County, that would equate to 0.5% of their budget. And 60 million is actually equivalent to slightly over 1 mil. So it's easy to increase the mills and receive more money than what you would be able to get from that 60 million in the first place. Also, with the protest petition, I really do love that idea, but the issue is that if you don't, if say you live in a county and you live out in the county, but you own property in the city for rentals or businesses, you can't protest the city tax because you're not a voter in the city. And that's a huge concern to me. So this is only for eligible voters and not for all property owners, and property owners are the ones who are impacted most. Basically, I can't support removing the revenue neutral because it has worked extremely well in my county and my district. The 60 million is easy to raise the taxes higher and get more money than what's being proportioned here. And the petition needs work done. For those reasons, I cannot support this bill. Thank you.
To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Body, I rise in support of this bill today. I think it marks a new era. I have spent 16 years as a county commissioner and 5 years as a legislator. And in that 20-plus year span, this is the first time that I can ever recall the state of Kansas working with and partnering with city and county government. I think this marks a new era. County government has criticized us through the years of mandating them to do certain things and telling us to stay in our own lanes. I've already heard back from a few commissioners that are appreciating this partnership. It's being referred to as a partnership. I think it marks a new era. I think this bill will be so successful that other states in time could do what Kansas is doing with this bill. So I urge your support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a freshman, but I was a county commissioner for 6 years. So this bill really affects counties. And the state has mandated 18 things for the counties to take care of. And we wouldn't know what to do without those 18 things. But since they have been put on counties, it is something that we, in a small county like I come from, it is something that we really need to look into. And I feel like this bill does a really good job of starting that process. R&R, for those of you who haven't been familiar with it, it's a good thing to give notification, but R&R is right here. And unless you go over R&R, your R&R stays right here. There's no growth factor in it. It doesn't matter if you've built businesses and housing. It doesn't matter what inflation's done. R&R is a stable number. And that is really hard when you're a commissioner during the COVID years and all the inflation to stay under that. And I don't think our people really understand that's what it does. And so this is a way to add a little bit of help with some growth in there, and also for just giving a number to the counties that they know if they do that, then they get a little bit of a bonus. Since we don't have LAVTR anymore, that was a big deal here too. It just will kind of help the counties, and for that reason, and all the work I've seen, and I am on this tax committee, and I have put in my 2 cents worth on part of this too. I really do think it's a real positive step in the right direction that can give our constituents some tax relief, because basically, as everyone said, the state doesn't really have control of any of that. It's the counties. So I would urge you to support 2396. Thank you.
All right, to speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Body, I rise in support of House Bill 2396. I was a county commissioner for 10 years until I resigned recently to enter this body of legislators. I am so excited about this bill from a couple of standpoints. One is, and it's already been referenced by prior representative, it creates more of a partnership than an adversarial relationship between state and local government. And so many times there's been this combative nature between locals and state. So I appreciate that. Secondly, my personality is one that I think we need to be incenting the right behavior rather than rewarding bad behavior. And in my opinion, this does that. It may not do it to the fullest extent that every one of us wants, but that's how you start legislation, is you put something in place that you believe has merit, and you may have to come back and refine that later on. Thirdly, local county governments, of which I am a product, are extensions of state government, and county governments are mandated to carry out responsibility for 18 different things that the state has mandated county governments to do, such as law enforcement, public health, sanitation, and a few other things, without appropriate funding following those mandates. This is a way, though, to work together with this particular bill and encourage that. And if it's done successfully, the counties and other local entities would be rewarded for their efforts. So with that, again, I rise in support of House Bill 2396. Thank you.
All right, and to speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Helgerson.
Would the carrier of the bill stand for a question?
Yes, good morning, Representative.
First, I'm going to publicly commend you for the way you run the committee and your hard work. No one is in this chamber is here longer at night and quite often earlier in the day than the chairman. I commend him for his hard work, and this is part of the process that he delivers, a very, very good bill. Now, I do have one question though. You put 60 million in. Can you explain where that money comes from and why that level?
I can. As with previous bills that we've debated up here on comprehensive tax relief over the last few years, I try to stay in close touch with the chairman of appropriations because I want to be very cognizant. I'm not a budget expert by any means, although I'm a numbers guy. I don't dive in and understand the details of the budget as well as he does. So I visit with him and I ask him, what is my budget? If we do tax cuts, what is sustainable tax relief from your perspective? And I visit with the speaker, make sure that we are all on board in agreement on what is sustainable moving forward. And the $60 million came directly from there.
Thank you very much. And again, I appreciate your hard work.
Thank you.
As you might gather, I sometimes take a contrary position on spending and taxes. And in fact, there's one or two members that kid me as number 89, I think. Last year, I don't know if you remember, I carried an amendment down here that said, instead of spending all of the one-time money and all of the other additional money that it was actually 2 years ago, that the governor had put in $1.2 billion, I said, let's put that into property tax reduction for the residential people of Kansas. I said, that can be distributed however we want by the chairman and the ranking D through the committee process. But I look at it and I say, we set directions about how we're going to get tax reduction. That was unsuccessful. And now we're back trying to talk about how we're going to do property tax reduction. And I have an amendment. Very briefly, instead of starting at the $60 million threshold, I start at the $100 million, meaning that we're going to give more money for property tax reduction. What does that mean to you? Well, if you look at the scenarios, it says maybe we're going to be a little bit more tighter in the out years. We won't be able to put as many projects together possibly. Maybe we won't be able to do some of the projects that we have dear to our heart. But I'll tell you, that just means that more money is being dedicated year in and year out for property tax reduction. And I think that's the number one priority of the taxpayers and the citizens of Kansas. Now, I'll also say, if we start at a higher level, we can always change it. We can decide that that's too much and we can go back in and change the law. I would rather start at a higher threshold and give the taxpayers what they want. How do I know that? 2004, I'm the individual that eliminated the funding for several of the local property tax reductions because I figured out a good trick of how to cut it and spend it. Worst decision I made. Gave the state more opportunity to spend an extra $100 million every year, but we eliminated the property tax reduction that should have been there for the counties and the cities. So that's what this amendment does, and I'll be happy to debate it, argue it, and say why I think that's a reasonable figure rather than the 60.
Well, let's not put the cart in front of the horse here. The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
As amended by House Committee on page 3 in line 7 by striking $60 million and inserting $100 million.
Does any member wish to speak to the amendment? The chair recognizes Representative Adam Thomas. Oh, sorry, different Thomas. Wrong Thomas.
Thank you,
Adam
Mr.
Smith, my bad.
I wholeheartedly disagree with the representative carrying the amendment. I think $60 million is a bargain. If we truly looked at trying to do our fair share of what these local governments are putting into the amount of money that they have to budget for to pay for the services that they're doing on our behalf, I would bet that number is closer to 600 million. Originally, when I was kind of starting to plan for the session, I was hoping for 200 million. But I have the ultimate respect for the perspective of our appropriations chair. And so that's why we have the $60 million. And then, unless there's a part of the amendment that I didn't see, there's no, I know it's not subject to pay-go, but I don't see anywhere that we're finding that extra $40 million here. So I'd encourage the body to vote what you want, but keep in mind we need to be fiscally responsible, make sure that we don't get the cart ahead of the horse here. But I'll be voting, unfortunately, against this amendment.
To speak to the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Waymaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When the question was poised to the chairman of tax as to where the figure came up, and also in regards to the tax bill that we passed last year, the chairman and I have had extensive conversations on what exactly we can afford as tax relief and how we can give that money back to the taxpayers of the state of Kansas. The $60 million figure was an analysis that was done in looking at what the budget would be looking at, and also what the implications of the tax bill that we passed last year will be. Keep in mind that we are going to have the consensus revenue estimate and our revenue numbers reported to us after we adjourn. So we are not going to know exactly the adjustment to those numbers until April 20th. And we are scheduled to possibly adjourn by April 12th. I wanted to be cautious when he and I were having the conversations in regards of what we can do in regards to property tax relief, because that was something that we were not able to do in the comprehensive tax bill of last year. 60 million, in my opinion, is a safe number. Going beyond that could have implications, especially, like I said, as we were trying to see exactly the implications of the tax bill that we had last year. The governor doesn't want to do any because she wants to see exactly how everything is going to pan out. I still think that we need to do something for property tax relief in the state of Kansas. 60 million is not enough. I agree with that. But it's being cautious with where the state budget is at, and then also waiting to see exactly what the consensus revenue estimate numbers are going to be on April 20th. So I would oppose the amendment because, like I said, we're going to get those numbers after we most likely adjourn. And if we would happen to have this amendment, it could have implications on the budget, and we would have to wait until next session to address it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To speak to the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said earlier, I think property tax relief, it was a top priority for my constituents. And before the session started, I felt like we got to provide at least $100 million of property tax relief. We didn't provide enough last year, and I still feel that way. So I don't know what else is going to pass this year, but this amendment would provide $100 million. And to me, that's the minimum amount we ought to strive for. I understand the budget situation. I'm not on appropriations anymore. But again, we're in a process here. And my hope is that by the time we're done at the end of the session, that the appropriations people will have it to where we can do at least $100 million of property tax relief, maybe more. That'd be nice. So I think we ought to be bold right now, go the $100 million. If we get to the end of the session and we just can't afford that, they can always cut that number back. But I think at this point in the process, we ought to at least do $100 million of property tax relief. So I'm going to support the amendment.
If there's no further discussion, Representative Helgerson, you may close.
Just love this position you're in. You know, last year, when I offered a $1.2 billion reduction in property taxes, people said, well, if it was just property tax reduction, we would have voted for it. Well, this is $60 million to $100 million. And yes, $40 million is a lot of money. Heck, we had the Senate conferees last year pipe in $20, $30 million of one-time extra money that they had for their special projects. They'd walk in and said, oh, we have a proviso. We want to add X millions of dollars for our project. And we acquiesced. That's why we changed the rules, because we didn't want that kind of special interest playing havoc with our budget. You set the direction of our budget by this vote. You say that property taxes are more important than some of the frivolous projects we fund. We have plenty of money. It's not that. We have enough money to take care of the needs that we have in the state and to fund property tax reduction. I urge you to support that. The bill is good, but let's make it better.
You've heard the motion by Representative Helgerson to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Nays appear to have it. Division's been called. The clerk will open the roll and you may vote. Has every member had an opportunity to vote? Yeas being 43, nays 74, the motion fails. Back on the bill. To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Petter Parshall for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is the first time I've ever spoken twice to a bill. One thing I left out when I spoke earlier was that not one single one of my constituents has asked for the repeal of revenue neutral. In fact, I got 10 phone calls from very upset constituents last night over the thought that revenue neutral was going to be removed. We've heard from former county commissioners up here, but we haven't heard from our constituents, and we need to remember that our constituents are the reason why we're here. Thank you.
All right, does any other member desire to speak to the bill? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Representative Adam Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your discussion. Thank you for all the time and thought you've put into this. This is a new law. This isn't something that we're making some tweaks and amendments to. So when you're reading those bills, it does take a little bit more time to read through them, try to understand what the new law is doing. That's not always an easy process. So thank you for all of your time trying to understand what the bill does. I want to thank the representative from Leavenworth for his comments. It wasn't my intention to point out Leavenworth County, but as I was going through there, I was trying to look at different cities and counties and how that revenue neutral law had worked or not worked for them, and that was one of the worst case examples that I came across when I found that. If you want to consider truth in taxation to be a statute, we are repealing truth in taxation. In my mind, truth in taxation is a concept. It should be a fundamental concept that I feel House Bill 2396 enhances. Revenue neutral, just as the name implies, puts the focus on last year's budget. Under this bill, we put the focus on the amount of the increase. That's what the taxpayers need to know. In fact, as this goes across the rotunda to the Senate, I might be working on some amendments because I think we could make this even better by putting that focus on not only the dollar amount. If they're wanting to exceed that threshold, maybe we can put in a notification requirement that people have to understand how much each local entity is proposing to exceed as a dollar amount and a percentage. I'm not going to stand here and say that this is a perfect bill. There is lots of room for improvement, and I think that could be one that would be very significant. It would retain that notification piece that was pretty important in revenue neutral. Wish I would have had this thought last night at 3 a.m. I might have had an amendment drafted, but appreciate the discussion. Appreciate all the comments, both in favor and opposed. I appreciate everyone's efforts on this bill. And with that, Mr. Chair, I would move when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2396 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Adam Smith to report HB 2396 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. The next item of business is SB 20. For the purpose of carrying SB 20, the chair recognizes Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. It was lackluster, but the ayes have it. Please continue.
Thank you. Senate Bill 20 is a carbon copy of House Bill 2045, which we passed in this chamber 104 to 10. The Senate did pass Senate Bill 2040 to 0. Effectively, it just reduces a few boards and gives the Commissioner of Insurance a few additional authorities for removing board members. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Does any member desire to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The carrier of the bill did an outstanding job. The only change that we made in committee was changing the date of, the location of publication from the state statute book to the register. Thank you, and I would ask for your support.
To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 20. I don't know if the rest of you have anything better to do today, but sitting around here making shells is not what we ought to be doing with our time. I therefore intend to vote no on this redundant and unnecessary legislation.
If there's no further discussion, Representative Bergkamp, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee arises and reports SB 20 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Bergkamp to report SB 20 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion passes. Next item of business is SB 21, and for the purpose of carrying SB 21, the chair recognizes Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. SB 21, again, is a similar bill that we heard here, which was House Bill 2044. We passed 105 to 9.
Were there committee amendments, Representative?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Yes, there were committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Senate did pass this 40 to 0. This deals with third-party administrators. Really no material changes on the Senate side. And the House, we did have one amendment for a date change, so this will go to conference. And with that, I will stand for questions.
All right, to speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, sir, for that excellent explanation. And I do ask for your support of Senate Bill 21.
To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Surprise, surprise. This is bad, redundant, and unnecessary legislation and a waste of our time. I intend to vote no on SB 21. I invite you to join me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There's no further discussion. Representative Bergkamp, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee arises and reports, it reports SB 21 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Bergkamp to report SB 21 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Next item of business is SB 22, and for the purposes of carrying SB 22, the chair recognizes Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for a third time. There were committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee report.
Heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the enthusiasm picking up on these bills. Again, 2042, Senate Bill 22 is equivalent of our House Bill 2042, which we had passed 103 to 8. The Senate bill had passed Senate Bill 22 40 to 0. This bill dealt with title insurance agents, audit reports, et cetera. The Senate really didn't make any material changes. And in our House committee on this bill, we made a date change. So again, it'll go to conference. And with that, I will stand for questions.
All right, to speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
I don't know if I should make a long, detailed report on the expertise that the information he just gave you, but I think I'm standing between you and us going home, so I back off. Please support Senate Bill 22.
To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think our constituents would probably like for us to spend our time working on real legislation and not shells. Quack, quack.
Well, if there's no further discussion, Representative Bergkamp, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for a final time. I move that when the committee arises and reports, it reports SB 22 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Bergkamp to report SB 22 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it, although less enthusiastic. The ayes do have it. The motion passes. Yeah, exactly. All right, the next item of business is HCR 5011. For the purpose of carrying HCR 5011, the chair, after a little rest, recognizes Representative Adam Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Body, HCR 5011 is a constitutional amendment proposing an amendment to Section 1, Article 11 of the state constitution that determines the valuation of real property. It proposes an averaging system to residential and commercial property, subclasses 1 and 6 in the state constitution.
Representative, was there a committee report on that?
You know what? There was. Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion by Representative Adam Smith. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. Very good. The committee report is adopted. Please continue.
Thank you for keeping me in line, Mr. Chair. As I was stating, this is a constitutional amendment that will impose a property valuation limitation based on a rolling average, very similar to what's in statute right now for the 8-year average that ag land uses. Currently, all real property is measured on actual fair market value for this year. This is kind of a smoothing effect to create more consistency in the valuation and allow for the elimination of those peaks and valleys. If you do see a sharp valuation increase, if it's a 6-year valuation average, it'll take essentially 6 years for that full increase to take effect. The amendment would appear on the general election of this year, 2025. You will, if you read the actual amendment language, it does not state the year, it does not state a lot of the specifics on how this would happen. Regardless of which constitutional amendment we would adopt on valuations, there is a Senate Resolution 1603 that is a 3% cap. Both of these amendments, proposed amendments, would require a trailer bill or a companion bill. If they were adopted in the November election, if it passes the legislature, it requires 2/3 vote. It doesn't, since it's a resolution, it does not go to the governor for veto authority. It goes straight to the ballot. If it passes on the ballot next year in 2026, we as a legislature will have to come back and figure out all the details on how this would be implemented. We usually want to try to provide fairly broad general language in the Constitution, because if we get something wrong, we can't just pass a law to change it. You have to go back and amend the Constitution again. So we want to leave the language in the Constitution relatively open. Ag land is an 8-year average. That's not in the Constitution. Use value is in the Constitution, then the 8-year average, and then the determination of use value is all in statute. So this is just following precedents that we've already set for other parameters in these. Some of the questions that you might see addressed, and some of the things that we have to identify when we run that bill in 2026. What happens if you sell your property? If I have a $100,000 home and it's been limited, or the average, the taxable value is less than the fair market value, if I sell that to a new owner, does the value automatically go up to fair market value and then continue from there? What happens if the value is $90,000, the taxable value, the appraised value is $100,000, and it sells for $125,000? Do we bump it up to $125,000, or do we leave it down at the lower value? We need to answer these questions. What about improvements? If I have a home that I double the value because I added on a garage and some bedrooms, maybe a little man cave or something, what what happens to that value? We have situations called splits and combos. You have a parcel that you might have a large area, some acreage, and you want to split it, sell off part of it, and just retain some of it for your own home. What happens in those situations? If it's a combination, maybe you bought a property next to you and you want to combine that into your same parcel. If it's been at full fair market value, but your own home has been modified and reduced at a lower value, how do you determine the equation there to decide what that new parcel is going to be? These are all very, very detailed, complicated questions, and I'm losing everybody because I see everybody not paying attention, but that's all right. I am too. Where am I? We have to answer these questions, and it's possible, but it's complicated. And this is why it'll take a bill next year to answer all of these questions should this amendment be adopted. And this is also the reason for the January 1st, 2027 implementation date. If we have to pass a bill next year, we can't have it become effective January 1st of 26. We haven't even passed a bill to understand how we're supposed to apply this. So assuming that we would pass a bill next March or April or whenever that would be, then Property Valuation Division over at Department of Revenue, all of your county appraisers and their mass appraisal software, they're going to have to reprogram their systems to account for whatever language is in that bill on how to handle all these situations and scenarios. This is a very complicated process. If this is what the people want, so be it. Personally, I'm not a real big fan of valuation limit in any form. But if we do have to have one, if this is what the people want, I think this is the best way to accomplish it because it really prevents some of the dangerous problems in inequality across property taxes if we just went with a flat rate. I do want to take just a second, okay, maybe a minute or two, and explain this is not property tax relief. I want people to understand that when you talk to people and they say they want a valuation limit, almost 100% of the time, those people are talking about they want a tax limit. And that's what we did in House Bill 2396 earlier. That's the valuation. That puts the focus on the taxes that they pay. A valuation limit just changes the proportion. And the only way you save any money is if you can figure out a way to limit your own property but nobody else's. And therefore your share goes down a little bit. But I want to go through just a quick example to make sure everybody understands this. Not only everybody in here, but anybody that might be listening. If you had a $100,000 home and you lived in a city with $200 million of valuation, total valuation, your ratio, the amount of the city budget that you're responsible for is $100,000, your property value divided by the total valuation. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds, but technically there's assessment limits and things like that too. I'm just trying to keep this high level. So your percent of the city budget that you're responsible for is 0.05%. 100,000 divided by 200 million. If the city adopts a budget of $2 million, it's a nice small city, your property taxes are 0.05% times $2 million, $1,000. Let's say a year later, housing market in your town just goes through the roof and your value of your home doubles. It's now worth $200,000. You get that. In fact, I'm sure you've got some emails and phone calls lately because guess what's coming out? March 1st, valuation statements, valuation notices. People are getting that statement right now. If you got a statement that said your value went from $100,000 to $200,000, what's going to happen to your property taxes? Absolutely nothing. Let me explain why. Again, it didn't just happen to your property, it happened to everybody's. So now your property is worth $200,000. The total valuation of your city is worth $400 million. 200,000 divided by 400 million. I'm sorry for geeking out here a little bit, but it's still 0.05%. The ratio remains the same. Multiply that by the budget, it's the exact same tax dollars. You could triple it, you could quadruple it, you could cut it in half, it doesn't matter. It all depends on what the budget of that local government is. We could pass an amendment that would say you only have to pay 11.5% of your total value. It's still going to be the same because that applies to everybody. The proportion never changes. Okay, sorry, that was more than a couple minutes. I do want to make everybody aware that there is a fiscal impact to this. This was never really mentioned in committee. When the Senate ran their constitutional amendment, I listened in on the committee hearings and the floor action. The fiscal impact was never mentioned there as well. But we do need to understand that when we kind of artificially reduce the total value, we're reducing our tax base. We are required to fully fund school finance, and part of that funding is the 20 mills. Any reduction, any amount, whether we have it codified in statute or not, any reduction in the amount of money that 20 mills brings in needs to be backfilled through SGF. And by artificially limiting our valuation numbers, there will be a small reduction. For this HCR, that reduction is about $25 million a year, 23.63. So that's each year in fiscal year. If this would be adopted in fiscal year 27, the fiscal year for the state would be fiscal 28. Fiscal year 29 would be 48.9 million. Fiscal year 30 would be 75.89, roughly $25 million each year. Because currently our budget profile, our budget projections include full fair market value of that appraised property. This would result, that's the impact on the state level. At the local level, it would be about a 3.5% increase in your mill levy to account for the lost dollars. So you can kind of see how you might see a savings on your valuation, but your mill levy is going to go up and you're going to end up paying the same amount of taxes. This is a lot better than the fixed cap at 3%. The fiscal impact on that, just for the state on the 20 mills in fiscal year 26, because theirs takes effect earlier, it's $165 million. In fiscal year 27, it's $187.7 million. Fiscal year 28, 211.9, it's roughly a 13% increase every year. The mill levy, the statewide average right now across the state for all of your aggregate is about 125 mills. That's the average total mill levy that every taxpayer pays. Some are higher, some are lower. But this would result, a 3% cap would result in an increase of 30 mills to that statewide average. So the statewide average would go from roughly 125 to 155. I think that concludes my comments, Mr. Chair, and I'll be happy to stand for questions.
Does any member desire to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the chairman of the tax committee did a very thorough job explaining the HCR. I'm rising in support of the HCR. As the chairman pointed out, none of these either types of valuation caps really reduce property taxes. But I am supporting this constitutional amendment because the one thing it does do, by using a rolling average, it gets rid of those spikes. So an individual's not going to get a large spike in their valuation in any given year. So for that reason, I do support the HCR.
All right, to speak to the resolution, the chair recognizes Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
As amended by House Committee on page 2 in line 6 by striking as defined by law and inserting for the current year and the 5 preceding years, In line 7, by striking all after establish. In line 8, by striking all before the stricken material. Also in line 8, by striking and. On page 4, in line 2, after portion, by inserting for the current year and the 5 preceding years. In line 3, by striking establish, by striking all in line 4. In line 5, by striking all before the stricken material. Also in line 5, by striking and. In line 19, by striking all after 2. In line 20, by striking all before the stricken material. In line 21, by striking and.
All right, Representative Fairchild, would you care to explain the net effect of the striking?
What the amendment does is it puts the 6-year rolling average for valuations into the text of the amendment. Right now, under the current text of the amendment, it leaves it up to the legislature to decide. I feel like it would be better just to put the 6-year rolling average into the amendment. Right now, when you read through the amendment, I think it's a little bit of a complex amendment, and it gives more power to the legislature. And, you know, what have we seen with some of these previous amendments with the pro-life value, the both amendment that failed? When that failed, what did voters tell us about that? They told us that the amendment was too complex, and they didn't like that it gave too much power to the legislature. And what is this? What is the current constitutional amendment doing? Well, it's giving more power to the legislature, and the wording of the amendment is pretty complex. And so I feel like this amendment that I'm introducing to the constitutional amendment would help to simplify the constitutional amendment a little bit. And it also wouldn't be giving more power to the legislature. It would just be putting the 6-year valuation, the 6 years in the constitutional amendment for the valuations. And I think that this would help it be more favorable to passing. I think it would be more popular with voters. I think it would just help to simplify the amendment, and it would make it a lot easier for voters to understand. I just feel like the way that it's written right now, it's a little bit too complex. When I first read this amendment, I felt like it was pretty complex and pretty hard to understand. And so I feel like putting the 6-year rolling average for valuations into the amendment simplifies it. And we also wouldn't be giving more power to the legislature. And so I think this would make it more popular with voters, and it would make it more likely to pass an election. So I'll stand for questions.
Does any member desire to speak to the amendment? The chair recognizes Representative Adam Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate this amendment. Codifying this in there would, I think, be easier to understand. However, I'm going to leave this up to the body. How confident are you that 6 years is the right number? Like I said earlier, the only reason I originally drafted it with 6 years in there, and after kind of having some discussions with my other committee members and some people about it, if 6 years doesn't end up being the right number and we need maybe to speed it up to 4 years, or maybe we need to extend it out to 8 years, we've already got that same average for ag land, we have to go through another amendment process. So if you're confident that 6 years is the perfect number and that's going to work great, go ahead and vote for this amendment. That it's my intention to have it be 6 years, but I prefer to have that flexibility in statute, just to allow for unintended consequences. We vote on stuff all the time down here. We think we have the right idea. We think we know what's true. And after it's implemented for a few years, we find out that something didn't work quite right. So I'm going to be voting against the amendment just because I do want a little bit of flexibility. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
To speak to the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually agree totally with the chairman of the committee. Originally, the 6 years was in the HCR, but the discussion was, do we really know if 6 years is the right number? I think this gives more flexibility to the legislature to figure out next year what the right number really is. So, I mean, I don't feel strongly about it, but 6 years might not be right. So for that reason, I am going to oppose the amendment.
All right, if there's no further Representative Adam Smith, the chair recognizes for a second time.
Thank you. I just visited with my research assistant, and here's a good example of why we need to be careful with this. If we adopt this amendment, this goes into effect immediately. The way we had planned to phase in the 6-year rolling average, the first year would be the fair market value, second year would be the 2-year average, third year would be 3-year average, you phase it in. This would take us immediately to the 6-year average. Our fiscal note, the fiscal impact for this, if we adopt this amendment, would be closer to the fiscal impact of the numbers I gave you on the 3%, $165 million, because all of that value would immediately drop. You would have a very significant loss of valuation, assessed valuation across the state. So I would strongly encourage you to vote against this. Again, I like the idea of the 6-year average and I like it being in there, but this would have a very serious impact on the state general fund as well as the local mill levies across the state.
There's no further discussion. Representative Fairchild, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't really aware of that last piece of information, but you know, I still feel like this amendment or the original amendment has some problems with it as far as the complexity of it, and you know, I was just trying to simplify the amendment a little bit, and also, you know, it is problematic, I think, to voters to give more power to the legislature. I'll close on my amendment.
You've heard the motion by Representative Fairchild to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Nays appear to have it. Nays do have it. Motion fails. We're back on the division has been called for. The clerk will open the roll. You may vote. Has every member had an opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the rolls. Yeas being 11, nay 104, the motion fails. Now we're back on the bill. To speak to the bill, the chair the resolution. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you still have the floor, Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Even though my amendment failed, I'm still going to be voting in favor of the bill or the constitutional amendment because I feel like it's at least a step in the right direction. It's at least better than nothing. And I feel like it'll result in a little bit of reduced valuations. It'll help improve things a little bit. So I would urge your support for the constitutional amendment. Thank you.
To further speak to the resolution, the chair recognizes Representative Petter Parshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Originally, I did have an amendment and I decided not to bring it, but this week we received our appraisals from the county, and the county mailed us our appraisals, but what they had put on the website didn't match. So there's a lot of concerns within our county as to what's actually going on, and to find a way to track the appraisals and the increase over the last 6 years, or if we start, depending on what the legislature decides. But the matter of the fact is this amendment, constitutional amendment, is extremely confusing. I don't know how you expect to actually go out and campaign for it when you're having to explain it in detail. And one other part is that if we never actually implement a rolling average, we're stuck with the status quo. So we can pass this and go on to the ballot. It can become part of our Constitution, but if the legislature never actually takes action, you're going to be stuck with the same exact thing that we have right now. And that's a huge issue for me, and that's the reason why it's extremely important that we either cap it at 0, cap it at 2, cap it at 3, do ag residential, however, wherever you want it, but cap it at a hard cap, even if it's just the assessed rate, not the appraised rate, because the voter or the property owners and the taxpayers deserve to know what they're going to be taxed coming up. The problem is that right now, we have the taxing entities that are able to say, we didn't raise your mill. You raised my taxes. It doesn't matter what the mill says. So it creates a lot more transparency with the taxing process if we actually have a hard cap on the assessed value, not necessarily the appraised value, but the assessed value. There's just no way that I can personally support an amendment that goes on the ballot and people are probably gonna leave it blank because, I mean, honestly, when you read it, can you figure out what we're trying to do? So I'm gonna vote no on this, just because of that, and I hope everybody else does too, but I don't think that's gonna happen anyway. Thanks.
To speak to the resolution, the chair recognizes Representative Hubert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I just want to appreciate the opportunity to be back at this well. Never thought I'd be here again, so I appreciate that coming to the well is an honor and a responsibility, and I'll try to keep my remarks short. I do support this constitutional amendment. I supported the previous bill, 2396, and in saying that, I want to do more because I think all of us want to do more because we've heard from our constituents, please do more. You know, I think in some ways, both of what the bills that we've dealt with today, they're not going to really cut property taxes in a way that I think our constituents want. And here's the reality. The only way we're going to be able to do that is through the budget process that we just went through. There were spending cuts in that bill. I was on a budget committee. Shout out to my budget chair from Hayes, who's not listening to me right now, but that's okay. Again, as I look at where we're at and what we've done, I appreciate, based on the tax cuts that were passed last year, by the way, thank you for that. As I followed the process, I am somebody that can appreciate and thank you for the votes you made for the property tax raise that was in there. There was a little bit, but it was in so many other ways that, you know, I can say thank you. I wish there would have been more property tax relief in what you did last year, and I really appreciate the representative from Sedgwick County, one of my Democratic friends, that made that case. To do more, we need to commit right now as we go into the budgeting process next year, as we look at the revenues that are going to come in and projections on April 20th, to commit to next year doing more than what we did this year to control our spending. If we don't do that, the $60 million that's even in the previous bill, you know, might be challenging to fund, because who knows, like the chairman of tax said, and the chairman of appropriations said, we have to pay for what we want to spend for relief on property taxes. And that's why initially I was thinking, okay, maybe we need to have a bill with picking out whatever we can get the support for to do across the board cuts looking into next year so that we can do more for property tax relief. And so that's what I would ask you to be thinking about now, both sides of the aisle, in regards to committing to the fact that our constituents clearly have spoken to us through this last election. You know, knocking on doors for the first time in a long time. Trust me, I live in a good district and I haven't had to knock on doors. I was amazed at the passion that people confronted me with on property taxes. It was the number one thing I heard at the door, at community forums, at the meet and greets that I did. And it was very long, strong, loud, and consistent. You have to do something about property taxes because I am grateful for God's blessing. I can pay for personally the property tax increases that I've been experiencing. There are a whole lot of people on fixed incomes that cannot afford them. We're going to be pricing them out of their houses because they will not be able to pay those property taxes. And if that statement doesn't make you take a deep thought on why I'm speaking about the cuts that we're going to have to continue to do from what was done this year and even more so next year in order to address that situation. Think of your family and friends and others that live in your district that at some point in time are going to have to put their house up for sale because they cannot afford to pay their property taxes. I'm hopeful that the bill that the tax chair put together to work with our local units of government can actually provide the intended results that we all hope we can get. The stick approach and the protest process, I'm intrigued about how that might play out. I'm hopeful. We'll see. I'm just asking you right now to really start to commit and explain to your constituents in regards to why spending cuts are going to be necessary, what we've done this year and what's going to be done next year, probably more than what's been done this year, in order to deal with this situation. So I thank you for the opportunity. It is an honor to come to the well. And in closing in my remarks, I will also just say as a personal note, I'm a very good friend of Carl Mon. He is my constituent and he's a former colleague to many of you. I keep in touch with him and he's doing well. Keep him in your prayers. If you have his number in your phone, give him a call. He will appreciate hearing from you. I guarantee that. And with that, again, I support this bill and the previous one, and thank you for allowing me to come to the well.
Right, batting cleanup, the chair recognizes Representative Osman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Would the carrier of the resolution stand for a question?
Certainly.
Thank you. I'm generally in support of this resolution, and I think that your example that you gave as far as assessed valuations versus the entirety of the budget, I never really considered it like that. So thank you for helping me to put context on that. I had a question though. I have a general concern that I've been kicking around, and maybe I can help to understand whether this is a reasonable concern or not. Assume an inequitable distribution of appraised value increase. And under the status quo, the way that it normally works is you get a tax bill and you go, whoa, this tax bill is a lot higher than last year. Then you look and go, my appraised valuation has gone up considerably. I need to go to the county and actually fight against that or to make an appeal to that. Under this proposal, now you've got this rolling average of maybe 6 years, maybe sometime longer or shorter. My concern is that it's years down the line before your taxes go up to an extent that you go, this is a problem, and by that point, it's been too many years to actually have an appeal. Is that reasonable? Is that a real concern, and how do we address that?
That will be one of the things they have to address in the companion bill in 2026, should this pass on the election of the people. It's my intention, and I did draft a bill, I think it's House Bill 2394, because I wanted to put an effort towards explaining try to address all of these questions, situations that would happen. Under an averaging system, each year, you'd have to pay attention to your valuation notice when you get it, 1st March or shortly thereafter. You would have to pay attention to what that valuation is because the appeals process would work the same. You appeal the valuation for that year. Should that be changed, then they can update the value to create that taxable value with the average, but you would still the county appraisers would still calculate the fair market value. Fair market value is theoretically what property should sell for if it's on the market. So each year, you'll have to still pay attention to that and focus on that valuation statement. If you feel like that is too high, I don't know that anybody ever thinks it's too low. If they do, they're pretty quiet. But if you feel like that's too high, you do need to go through the appeals process and start that after that valuation statement. Don't wait until you get your taxes. You could still pay in protest and challenge that valuation at that point. We do have those two options.
Okay. So the answer is generally just more education to the taxpayers as far as keeping aware of what's going on. I'm interested as well in the bill that you cited, but we can discuss that offline. Thank you very much.
All right, if there's no further discussion, Representative Adam Smith, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rise and reports it, report House Concurrent Resolution 5011 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Smith to report HCR 5011 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Chair recognizes Representative Croft.
Mr. Chair, I move we rise and report.
You've heard the motion to rise and report. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, nay. Very good. Motion passes.
The clerk will read the committee report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole recommends that SB 7 be passed, House Bill 2396, SB 20, SB 21, 22 be passed as amended, and HCR 5011 be adopted as amended.
The Speaker recognizes Representative Sutton to adopt the committee of the whole report.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion to adopt the committee report. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. The Speaker recognizes Majority Leader Croft for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule 2311, I move that an emergency be declared and Senate Bill 7, House Bill 2396, Senate Bill 20, Senate Bill 21, Senate Bill 22, and HCR 5011 be advanced to the order of business, final action on bills and concurrent resolutions.
You've all heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, the motion carries. Final action on bills and concurrent resolutions, the clerk will read.
SB 7 by Committee on Local Government, Transparency and Ethics, an act concerning townships relating to the bonding authority thereof, increasing the statutory limits on such bonding authority based on the population of the township, increasing the statutory limit on bonding authority for improvements to a township fire department.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 7. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. As every member had the opportunity to record their vote, the clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 116 having voted in favor and 5 against the passage of Senate Bill 7, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The clerk will read.
House Bill 2396 by Committee on Taxation, an act concerning property taxation, relating to property tax revenues of taxing jurisdictions, authorizing the use of a protest petition to limit funding of a taxing jurisdiction by property tax revenues above a certain amount, establishing the Acknowledging Stewardship of Tax Revenue and Appropriations ASTRA Fund and authorizing certain transfers from the State General Fund to qualifying cities and counties, requiring reporting by the state treasurer of the cities and counties that receive transfers, eliminating the revenue neutral rate requirements by taxing subdivisions and the Taxpayer Notification Costs Fund.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2396. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. As every member had the opportunity to record their vote, the clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? For an explanation, the speaker recognizes Representative Schmoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're all here today because we told our constituents at the door, at local town halls, and then the grocery store aisles that we were going to work hard to give them the tax relief that they could feel in their family budget. This bill does not go far enough to give true relief. However, it is one more step in that direction. I'm voting yes with the acknowledgement that we have more work to do, both in the tax relief as well as budget cuts, to make that tax relief tangible for my constituents. Thank you.
Speaker recognizes Representative Corbett.
House Bill 2396 is one of those bills that sounds good on the surface, but if you dig in, you will see it written in a way that tilts the scales in favor of county governments. The taxpayers have no personal notification of the county budget and the possibility of an appeal. The number of signatures is too high and the time frame is too short. I support policies that benefit the individual taxpayer, not enriching local units of government. Therefore, I vote no. Representative Corbett, Carter Parshall.
Are there any further explanation of votes? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 115 having voted in favor and 6 against the passage of House Bill 2396, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The clerk will read.
SB 20 by Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance, an act concerning insurance, reducing the number of board members appointed by the Commissioner on certain insurance-related boards and the frequency of the meetings of the Committee on Surety Bonds and Insurance.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 20. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. As every member had the opportunity to record their vote, the clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 100 having voted in favor and 21 against the passage of Senate Bill 20, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The clerk will read.
SB 21 by Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance, an act concerning insurance, requiring that third-party administrators maintain separate fiduciary accounts for individual payers and not contain funds collected or held on behalf of multiple payers, and disclose to the Commissioner of Insurance any bankruptcy petition filed by or on behalf of such administrator pursuant to Chapter 9 or Chapter 11 of the United States Bankruptcy Code.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 21. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. As every member had the opportunity to record their vote, the clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 101 having voted in favor and 20 against the passage of Senate Bill 21, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The clerk will read.
SB 22 by Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance, an act concerning insurance, relating to title insurance, requiring title agents to make their audit reports available for inspection upon request of the Commissioner of Insurance instead of submitting such reports annually, requiring the amount of surety bonds filed with the Commissioner to be $100,000, eliminating the controlled business exemption in certain counties.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 22. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Brownlee Page votes no. Representative Wilburn votes aye. Any further changes? Seeing none, with 94 having voted in favor and 27 against the passage of Senate Bill 22, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The clerk will read.
HCR 5011 by Committee on Taxation, a proposition to amend Section 1 of Article 11 of the Constitution of the State of Kansas relating to property taxation, valuing residential real property based on the fair market value or average fair market value of the residential portion.
This constitutes final action on HCR 5011. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Carr votes no. Any further changes? Seeing none. With 117 having voted in favor and 4 against the passage of HCR 5011, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Reports of standing committees, the clerk will read.
The Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources recommends HB 2012 be amended and the bill be passed. The substitute bill be passed, sorry. The Committee on Judiciary recommends SB 84 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Judiciary recommends SB 71 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Local Government recommends SB 2 as amended by Senate Committee be passed, and because of the committee is of the opinion that the bill is of a non-controversial nature be placed on the consent calendar. The Committee on Judiciary recommends SB 135 be amended on page 2 and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Elections recommends SB 6 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Judiciary recommends HB 2349 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Judiciary recommends HB 2131 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Judiciary recommends SB 53 be passed. The Committee on Transportation recommends SB 98 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Transportation recommends SB 97 as amended by Senate Committee be passed. The Committee on Transportation recommends SB 18 as amended and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Health and Human Services recommends SB 175 as amended by Senate Committee be passed. The Committee on Health and Human Services recommends HB 2236 be passed. The Committee on Elections recommends SB 5 as amended by Senate Committee and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Health and Human Services recommends SB 126 be amended by substituting with a new bill to be designated as House substitute for Senate Bill number 126 as follows: an act concerning health and health care, and the substitute bill be passed. The Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development recommends HB 2392 be passed. The Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development recommends HB 2400 be passed. The Committee on Appropriations recommends SB 14 be amended, and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Child Welfare and Foster Care recommends HB 2132 be amended by substituting with a new bill to be designated as substitute for House Bill number 2132 as follows: an act concerning children and minors, and the substitute bill be passed. The Committee on Insurance recommends SB 42 as amended, and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Elections recommends SB 105 as amended, and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development recommends SB 199 as amended, and the bill be passed as amended. The Committee on Education recommends SB 76 as amended, and the bill be passed as amended.
House Bill 2111 is withdrawn from the Committee on Calendar and Printing and referred to the Committee of the Whole. Are there announcements? Representative Hoy replaces Representative Simmons on the House Committee on Legislative Modernization on Monday, March 10th, 2025. This appointment will expire at the end of the day on Monday. The Speaker recognizes Representatives Laura Williams and Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right, body, the Kansas Special Olympics shrimp peel is just 20 days from now on March 26th. 100% of the proceeds of this annual event will go to the Kansas Special Olympics. Please bring any auction items over the next couple of weeks, which the examples could include sports memorabilia, K-State, KU Chiefs, basket of home items, wine baskets, special bourbons or liquors. There will be a silent auction as well as a live auction, so be creative so we can send a big check to the Kansas Special Olympics.
And you can use your campaign funds to donate. Many times I've been at the front door. I kind of say, if you haven't paid yet, pony up. So be sure and bring your checkbooks when you come. Checks can be made out to the Kansas Special Olympics. Each year we have a contest with the Senate as to who will raise the most money. Fortunately for us, we've been on a winning streak for the last few years, and there's no reason we can't do this again. But we need your donations. The flyer on your desk has the names and phone numbers of the lobbyists you can call to come by and pick up your items. If you have checks or something like that, Laura and I would be glad to take the money. We have shopping trips planned. Not. So we hope to see you at Special Olympics again. It's on March 26th. Look around this weekend. Find your Special Olympic surprise gifts that you're going to bring, or start writing your checks for donations. Again, use your campaign account. I look to him too. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's beat the Senate.
Representative Lewis.
Good afternoon. The next meeting of the Select Investigative Committee will be held on Monday morning, this coming Monday morning at 9 a.m. in room 112 North. Again, Monday morning, 9 a.m., 112 North, the next meeting of the Select Investigative Committee. Thank you.
Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats, Monday, March 10th, we will have agenda at 8:30, 152 South, 8:30. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Monday, 12 o'clock, Veterans Caucus will meet, room 218 North. Veterans Caucus, 218 North. We will have a speaker. Thank you.
Seeing no further announcements, the Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion. Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Attention commerce fans. Here we go. We sent the daycare bill back to committee yesterday, and so we're going to look at that today. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to have the commerce members and any other House member that wants to weigh in can come show up and raise their hand, and we'll call on you, and you can tell us what you think. That'll be the first hour. After that, we're going to take some suggestions from the committee. All right? See you at 1:30, Old Supreme Court room. Thank you.
Representative Neighbor for a second announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The chairman of Insurance and I will have a concurrent resolution at our desk for members to sign. Doesn't have to be on this side or that side, find one. What this covers is urging Congress to give state insurance regulators authority over Medicare Advantage plans. And so it's a letter to be sent for that reason. So as I say, insurance chair over here or myself, we're glad to have your signatures. We need them by Tuesday at the end of the day. Thank you.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my ranking for reminding me of that resolution. It is indeed sitting on my desk. It is good, despite the fact that the previous representative, endorsed it. But no, I'm playing. No, it's a good resolution, and I urge everyone to get on board. It's sitting there on my desk. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further announcements, the Speaker recognizes Majority Leader Croft for a motion to adjourn.
Okay, bad news first. Republicans, we will calendar Monday at 8 a.m. in the old Supreme Court. Yeah. You guys, just look around real quick. There's been a lot going on, and we have been doing all 5 days, going through the process. We're trying to get the bills that need to go up there, get them moving, get the things. So I'm trying to keep that process moving along so we don't have them all at the very end. But with that, I know it comes a lot of stress, and a lot of people are feeling affected. So if you see somebody that's not really, that feels like they're out of sorts, put your arm around them, make sure everybody's okay. We have some people that need somebody put their arm around them. All right. I knew how that was going to come across to somebody. I know. Thanks, sir. I appreciate you. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Monday, March 10th at 11 a.m.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned.
I can't wait.